Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and this is How to Make an RPG in Unity 5, and welcome to episode 6. So, before we begin with this, I want to address a quick little question that I've been asked a couple of times regarding these hearts here. Now, if you remember the script itself, what we do is when we collect the heart, we play the sound and we deal with our UI, but then we set it as inactive down here. We don't actually destroy it. We don't get rid of it out the game world completely. Now, the reason for this is because that heart can then be recycled and used elsewhere in the game world. So then theoretically, you only have that one single heart being used for multiple occasions. So for example, if let's say we're here, we collect this heart, and then we go off into the world, we kill an enemy of some kind, that heart can then respawn where that enemy is, because we've still got it in the game world, thus saving memory and space. So that's one reason why we don't ever destroy things in the Unity game world. Sometimes it is necessary, sometimes it isn't, but in cases like this heart, it's always best to just set it as inactive and reuse it. So this episode, we're going to look at a little bit more environmental buildings. I want to turn this area, or at least start turning this area into sort of a village. We'll look at some animation as well. Unity can be somewhat useful for animation. Sometimes, though, you're better off creating animation in, for example, 3D Studio Max, Maya, Blender, whichever. But we'll just be doing it in Unity for something kind of cool later on. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to my Objects folder. And we have our heart there. So what I'm going to do is move them into a new folder. So create folder, and let's have heart. I'm going to take the materials folder and the heart and drag them both into that folder. Now in here, I'm going to let's bring in this village building. So drag and drop that folder into here. And you can get that on our website for free if you head over there, downloads and assets section, and click on the RPG series, head to episode 6, and you can download all the assets that I use in this tutorial. So village building, and let's go into prefabs. And let's bring in building 01. It's not quite working as intended. We might need to go into meshes, it would seem. Yes, we'll go into meshes instead. So if we bring in building 01 from the meshes folder, I don't think I actually created the prefabs in the end, so that could be why the prefabs aren't working. So we've brought in one building, and let's bring in building 2. Let's rotate that building 2, shall we? In fact, let's put that as 0. It's on its side, so back to -90. So we want to turn it that way. So let's put that as 90. Let's bring it just over here. So as you can see at the moment, we're kind of designing our game world a little bit more. Sometimes it takes a bit of refining. So I'm going to bring that to about there. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to quickly modify the terrain. So if you remember, we can go click on terrain, go to the paint tools. Let's paint a little bit of grass just around here. And I want to make the path here a bit solid. So I'm going to reduce the brush size to about 3. And let's have, oops, I've gone a bit astray there. About there. And then, yeah, just a quick recap on the grass. Let's take the grass and just paint over where we need to. Oops, brush size too big there. Let's have the opacity much higher. Target strength much higher. Okay, so our village is coming together quite nicely now. So next thing I'm going to go into is some box colliders and just general colliders on the whole. So these buildings as they are don't actually have any colliders on. So theoretically, we can actually walk right through these buildings. It's not particularly very good, but you can see we can end up going right through them. So to stop this from actually happening, what I might need to do is just pull it into the ground a little, because they're, in fact, no, do you know what? These were designed to have a step up, so we'll leave that for now, and we'll have a step up at some point. If you want to bring it into the ground, you can. It's just a case of bringing it to about there. So I'll do that for now. Although it doesn't really matter too much because it doesn't affect the collider at all. Okay, so I'm going to start with this building. And if we go down here in our inspector panel to add component, and let's go to physics, you'll see here that we have a couple of different colliders. Box collider, you'll see we'll put a gigantic green box around the object itself. So this can be pretty much applied to any object. Although it works, you'll encounter a few different problems with it. So we can't actually walk through it anymore. However, we can't actually get to the house here because the box collider itself stretches from here all the way to here. So this area here is actually unavailable to get into. So in the case of this house, it's probably not a good idea to have a box collider. So let's right click and remove component, and that green outline should disappear. So what can we do? If we go to add component again, go to physics, you'll see something here called mesh collider. If we click on that, not a lot will happen just yet, but when you click on convex, you'll see that it kind of builds up a bit of a, how can I put it, an outline around the building. Although it's not perfect, it's a lot better than what the box collider was, so you can still get close. What this does is it brings up around the, kind of weighs up the angles and the possibilities of what a collider can be. So if you didn't know at this point, a collider is a way of stopping things interacting. So if we head over there now, let's pick up a heart, you can see we can get a little bit closer to the house. It's not perfect, but there are different ways of doing that. So theoretically, you could put 2 box colliders on here. It's not entirely recommended, but you can play around with the settings a little bit and change them to whatever you would want it to be. So I'm going to leave that one there. I'm going to go to this house here, and I'm going to do the exact same. Not effects. It's physics and a mesh collider, and then tick on convex. So you can see the same's happened there. Okay, so we have our village slowly coming together. Let's add a little bit of feature in there. So let's bring in this little mushroom. It's nothing too taxing this, so I'm going to put that just here in objects. And we have an error there, so it's complaining, but never mind. Mushroom, and just bring in mushroom. It's quite huge, so let's change the size of that. Let's have it as 0.01, 0.01, and 0.01. You'll find a lot of the time some of these random models that you get are quite large, but it's nothing to worry about too much. They cannot easily be scaled. As we can see, we scale that quite nicely. So I'm going to rotate, bring it up. Let's have -90. And then we just need to apply the texture to the object itself. So on the cylinder, which is attached to the mushroom, we just need to drag and drop texture. And there we go. So we've already been through ways you can handle textures, and we could theoretically change how this looks if we go to our text, or material, I should say, and modify the metallic look, the smoothness look, all that kind of thing. And we can add a quick little normal map. So if we duplicate it, change it to normal map, click on apply, and let's just stick that onto the mushroom as a normal map. So that looks kind of cool now. So I'm just going to move this over here. And let's duplicate it, create another one, just put it there. So it's just a case of modeling your environment with different things like this. It's up to you how you do, but I would recommend having a quick look around at different objects that you can find anywhere and just put them in your game. So next thing I'm going to do is head back to my objects folder, and I'm going to bring in this notice board. Now this notice board is going to serve as our focal point for the rest of this tutorial because we're going to be doing a couple little things with it. The idea is that I want this notice board to be, how can I put it? our quest board, we could say. So I've drag and dropped the prefab here into the scene. Now this notice board itself, I've had quite a lot of people asking about objects and assets that are brought into Unity. And a lot of you will have seen that I've recently started a quick tutorial on Blender. So what I've decided to do is this particular notice board, I am going to record a short little tutorial of how this notice board is made in Blender, and then we can see how objects created within a 3D modeling tool can be brought straight into Unity. As I say, pretty much everything that you see has been made one way or another and just brought into Unity. And this is something I put together maybe 2 weeks ago before I started preparing for this episode, and it was done in Blender. So as I say, this is going to serve as our quest board. Now a quest board, I'm aiming for a bit of a fantasy style here. So I want a little exclamation mark over here, over the board itself. So I'm going to go over to it. So I want an exclamation mark over it to say, oh look, there is a quest. So this is where our animation comes in. So what to do, if we go to game object, 3D object, and let's start with a sphere. And let's put that into position. So we want it over the notice board itself. In fact, what I might do is attach it to the notice board like that. So drag and drop, zero out the axis on it, and then uncouple it so as it's up here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to shrink it. So let's have 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. Is that too small? Is that big enough? Might need to make that just a little bit bigger. Okay, that looks fine. So what I'm going to do now is right click and I'm going to go to 3D object and go to, let's go with cylinder. And let's bring this cylinder up. And I'm going to shrink it just a little. So let's see what's the scale going to be. We want to keep the Y as it is for now. So 0.75 and 0.75. So hopefully that makes it look a little bit more like an exclamation mark. So let's create a quick material. Let's have a yellow material. Let's go to our materials folder, right click, create, and material. I'm going to have yellow 001. Just keep everything in check. So let's click over here on the white and change it to yellow. And let's have it a little bit metallic and a little bit more smooth. And let's drag and drop that material onto the cylinder and the sphere. So I'm going to change the cylinder name to, let's see, X Mark 02. And I'm going to have the sphere as X Mark. So if we select this X mark as it is, we can move it up and down, which is fine. So what we want to do now is animate it. Now, by default, I don't think Unity will bring up the animation tab. So to do that, if we go down here, you'll see this little drop-down menu next to the lock icon. If we click it and then click on Add Tab, we can then go down and add animation. And it should hopefully add it next to console. Now you can add this tab pretty much anywhere. You can have it up here if you want in the main scene view with the game tab or inspector, or you can have it dragged out as a whole new kind of tab. But I like to generally keep it here in my console, next to my console, I should say. So let's create a brand new folder here just for animations. So on assets, right click, create a new folder, and let's have animations. And in that folder, I'm going to create another folder and call it Village 01. So obviously we're going to have more villages later in the game which may need different animations, but for now I'm going to have it in here. So make sure you're in this folder right here. Click on your X mark and make sure everything is selected. Make sure it is parented here with X mark 2. and then click on Animation, and then click on Create. It'll ask you to save the file, and I'm going to call this X Mark Anim, and then click Save. And hopefully in here, in the inspector panel, you should see this little component called Animator, and it should have a red box next to it. That means we should be in record mode. You can tell that by the fact up here, the play and pause buttons are red, and the little record button here is also set to red. So what I want to do is make this exclamation mark bob up and down. So to do that, what I'm going to do is start with its position on the Y as about there. So you'll notice if you drag it up on the Y to where you would like it to start, you'll have this couple of little dots there. That represents the first frame. So by the, let's say, what frame? In fact, do you know what? I want to set that to a good number that we can remember. So I'm going to set that to 2.9. I think that's a good number. It's always best to write down the first frame. So I'm going to write that down, 2.9. Next thing we need to do, I'm going to bring this exclamation mark down a little bit. So we'll do that over the course of a second. Our samples is 60, which means 60 frames a second. So we're going to go to the 60th frame, which is exactly 1 second. So type in 60. And now let's bring our exclamation mark down to where we want to see it after a second. So let's have it about there. That's fine. So now let's move it up some more. So we want to go after, let's say, another 2 seconds. We want it to be at its top possible point. So we add 2 seconds to our frames. So that will be 60 plus 120, which makes 180. And let's bring it up to about there. And now after 1 more second, we want it back in its original position. So we add 60. So we go to frame 240. And then we set it back to what the first frame was. And if you remember, we had Y set as 2.9. So when we're done, to click on the little record button there. Head back to project, and you can see the animations are saved. So this is the animation, and this is the file which helps it relate to what it should be animating. So now, if we press play and head over to our notice board, you can see already that the exclamation mark is animating. So, as I said earlier, what I want to do with this is whenever we have a new, let's say, quest on our board here, this will start animating to say, oh, you have a new quest. So the way we're going to do this is in the next episode, we're going to have a script to interact with this notice board and more than likely have something stuck on there. So we can have another object on top of this object saying you have a quest. That's where we're going to go with this one. So from there, we'll end up doing more quests, we'll do different things, and generally we're going to pull together our RPG. So over the time as well, I'm going to slowly build up this village as well as doing other things. It's always important to build your world up and make sure it's full, not empty and barren, especially in an open world game. So soon enough we'll end up having our enemies, we'll have weapons, and we'll do all sorts, and we'll be doing all that stuff fairly soon. Because I'd like the first quest to be, let's say, kill something. So we'll kill an enemy as our first quest. So that is where I want to go at this point. So before we end this tutorial, it's up to you how you want to handle these particular buildings. Generally, they do look fairly nice, and you can get different objects from loads of different places. Possibly check out the asset store. There's some great stuff on there. There's very talented people who do make a lot of different things. So if you go to the textures, you'll notice this texture itself has quite a lot of different textures. These are extracted from a little package that I think you can get for free on the asset store, but they are just a simple extract of that. So I'm going to take this and turn it into a normal map. So I've duplicated it there. I'm going to click on apply and then quickly have a look how these buildings look with the normal map attached. So the normal map goes straight onto the normal map there, and we can see they look a little better. So you can always use the sliders here to give them slightly better looks. It just depends how you want your game to look in the end. So if we press play now with that little adjustment, they look a bit shiny, but that can easily be solved with a little bit of playing around. So I'm just going to undo that a little, and I'm going to leave my buildings like that. The same can be said for the notice board. So if you do want to do that, it's just a case of going to the textures folder, taking your textures and doing a normal map on them. So guys, until next episode, you do what you need to. You go have a look for some random environment things that you can stick into your game. And I will see you next time where we'll be creating or starting to create our quest from the notice board. Guys, thanks for watching.